Welcome, everybody, to the glorious episode of the Signal Caller. I'm your host, Dwayne Douglas, along with Solo Lopez, the Solo Lopez. You can check that out on Twitter. And then I'm at PORSBR is my Twitter handle. Check me out there. All those things like this. So everything college football, pro football, where we're always here for you as far as that goes. Kind of looking at the Raiders here. We talk about everything around football, around the NFL, but right now, kind of more like 70%, 80% Raiders on this show. Pete Carroll's new head coach. Right now it's him and John Spicek. Now back then in 2010, it was him and John Schneider. Kind of want to look at that draft real quick, right? To take a quick pick at that draft that they had in 2010. So at the sixth pick, ironically enough, they have a sixth pick again here this year. Excuse me, this year. But that sixth round pick was Russell Okung, the tackle, Oklahoma State. Their second pick was a first round pick that they added they got from Denver. 14th pick overall ended up being Earl Thomas. Then you got the 60th pick was Golden Tate, Notre Dame, Walter Thurman out of Oregon, EJ Wilson, defensive end out of North Carolina. The number 133 pick in that draft was a fifth round pick for Virginia Tech safety Cam Chancellor. Then you got sixth round pick. You got Anthony McCoy, Dexter Davis, defensive end from Arizona State, and then Jamison Cons from Kent State. And it was a seventh round pick. That was a compensatory pick. So the last two picks were second.
Yeah,
was seventh round picks. But I kind of want to
half of the Legion of Boom right then and there.
Exactly right. And I would kind of want to show fans this and kind of like talk about it real quick, because when you have a draft and you go into the draft and you talk about all these players and you want this guy, that guy, and then talk about we'll get this guy in the fifth. Like for the most part, this is like I think this is the same as the Raiders have. I think this is 9 picks. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So it's 9 picks there. Raiders have 9 picks. You're if you get 4 guys who end up starting,
Yeah,
that's a really good pick. That's a really good draft. If you get anything over that and they're starting players, or they're trending towards becoming starters down the road, that's a tremendous draft. So
yeah.
just kind of keep that perspective when you're doing your mock drafts and everything like that. Some of the guys you might have, in the middle or in the back half are probably not going to make a roster or be in the league for a long period of time. But this here was like, I don't think there's a tackle. To me, it's not a tackle worth taking at 6. So I don't think the Raiders will go tackle. Possibly maybe trading back. If they do trade back, I think a guy like Malachi Starks, who is probably one of the best players in this draft, he definitely fits a need, because I don't know, because at safety they really don't have anything there. I don't think Jeremy Chin is going to stop the Raiders from drafting another safety.
Do you think that their plan right there is Polamalu, and since that was the first move they actually made was Polamalu, and then signing Jeremy Chin in free agency, you think that they feel like that those are their tandem guys? Polamalu has the size that they like, that big, giant, physical safety type of deal. Is he that good? I mean, well, I guess we'll find out. Me personally, I don't think so. I don't think he's the starting caliber safety, but I'm willing to be proven wrong in that regard when he starts next year for them if they don't draft a safety.
Yeah.
Going to the Seattle draft is that, I think they had Matt Hasselbeck still then in 2010.
Yeah, he was still the quarterback.
Yeah, so they're and in the next 3 years they acquired Richard Sherman, Russell Wilson, Bobby Wagner. These are Hall of Fame players.
Crazy.
And all that. They Brandon Browner was another guy that they got in that situation. He was a part of that. Legion and Boom for a while. They got a bunch of really, really good guys in the next 3-year span. So that 3-year span, basically, you could have built, they built, an elite contending team, a Super Bowl winning champion team in the span of that 3 years. So it sucks the state of we're in now, where the Raiders are feeling like some fans, including myself, don't feel like they're going to aggressively attack the quarterback position in the draft, which is something we've called for who knows how many years in a row now. But if you are loading up with talent on that, and you do play it in terms of being able to find a quarterback anywhere in the first 3 rounds, not necessarily just the first, then you can kind of gauge, what the plan is moving forward in that regard. So we're hoping, at least for
Yeah.
the most part, that that's the case.
And it's funny, like I'm jumping to 2020, 2011, and James Carpenter,
First
Alabama
rounder. Yeah.
a tackle, John Moffitt, a guard from Wisconsin. Then here comes the KJ Wright. Here comes the fifth round Richard Sherman.
Hall of Famer.
Sixth round comes Brian Maxwell, who started on the other side.
Oh,
Uh,
Byron Maxwell. Yeah.
Byron Maxwell was the other part of
Yeah,
that
that's right.
defense.
He was in that same draft.
Yeah, and
Holy
then yeah,
smokes.
and then you got
So
and yeah, and then you got and then you got Mac and you got Malcolm Smith, in the who was
Super
the
Bowl
last pick.
MVP.
Yeah, who was the last pick of that draft. So
Unbelievable. So that means the
again,
next year,
yeah,
in 2012, is when they got Bobby Wagner and Russell Wilson in the same draft. And it
yep.
wasn't those two guys. They actually got several others. I think Bruce Irvin came out of that draft too. So
And this was Bruce Irvin a unrestricted free agent? I mean,
no, he was the first rounder.
undrafted first round. Okay, I don't
He
remember.
was
I
the
don't
first round. He
remember.
was the 15th overall pick. People out of West Virginia. I think people like.
Was he
I remember.
really?
I remember how much they didn't like that pick.
Yeah. So again, so I'm going back to back years, and then I'm looking at so KJ Wright, we know, um, Richard Sherman, Byron Maxwell, and then they ended up getting four starters
Yeah,
out of it. So like it's so that's what you have to really kind of look at. Like I mean, some of these guys are going to be duds, or just be special teams, or just our backup players. But
yeah,
if you can, so back to back years in Seattle, Pete Carroll was able to get eight starters
yeah.
in those drafts. So that's what. So if you're the Raiders, you're hoping for a little, maybe a little, hopefully get a little bit more than that. But I mean, that's basically kind of the law of averages is saying that's where you're going to end up probably being as far as that goes.
Yeah, so they're just coming off the Holmgren team in that regard too. So Pete Carroll's taking
Yes.
over in 2010. Holmgren was there. He took them to the Super Bowl a couple years prior to that. Matt Hasselbeck was going to be there for another 2 years until
Hey Matt.
Russell Wilson takes over as a rookie.
Hey, not bad for a franchise to go from Mike Holmgren to Pete Carroll. Just
100%. Yeah,
just saying.
would be
Just saying. Just saying.
the best case scenario in that situation.
That's not you can't get too mad about that.
Yeah. So
So
obviously we're hoping for something that even remotely resembles a three. I mean, that 3 year span is generational, so we can't
yeah,
expect that type of results. However, the fact that they have it on paper and that Pete Carroll was a part of a team and a general manager office and a front office team that had put together those types of drafts, it gives you hope moving forward. However, dissatisfied we are with the start of this offseason, we're going to have to play it by they're going to build the team through the draft and draft and develop and not going to overspend in that situation,
yeah,
which is a
yeah.
little disappointing considering they had the second most money coming into the offseason and they just didn't spend it on anybody except for Geno Smith's retention or trading, retaining Max Crosby at a higher number, not extending him to lower the cap, but giving him a front loaded contract. And then obviously getting the Palomar deal and the Kappa deal done before free agency even started.
So real quick before we get to Dax Jackson Dart, real quick here, there are there's some news about quarterbacks around the league, real quick. So you have people trying to maybe a possible trade for Cousins. People are calling about Cousins to see if they can get Cousins out of Atlanta. Will Levis is another guy who we're thinking about. People are trying to think about try to trade for.
Yeah.
Kirk Cousins, and then Joe Milton as well. The Patriots trying to get a 3-4. I think that's kind of high for a guy with his lack of experience. But hey, he still is a quarterback. So take it from there. I mean, I know Pittsburgh is trying to obviously be patient with Aaron Rodgers because I think that's the guy they really want. So we'll have to see what happens with there. And then you
Yeah.
also have the Giants who are they're probably in the toughest spot of it because they're just a mid team. Like they're not as complete as some of these other teams. So
I wouldn't even say they're a mid team. I would say that they are a team in purgatory. They
Yeah.
have what feels like a lame duck coach and a lame duck general manager. They have no quarterback situation. They have talent on the defensive end, and they have Malik Neighbors, and that's about it. So even if they draft a quarterback at 3, you're drafting into a front office and a coach tandem that feels like they're in the last year of their deal anyway. It feels a little bit like the Caleb Williams situation last year. Is that maybe if they had spent a bunch of money trying to acquire some talent to get ready to take a quarterback, maybe that would be different. But it doesn't
Mhm.
feel like they're doing that, and it feels like they're just honestly just feels like they don't really care what's about to happen. Or maybe ownership is not letting them make these types of decisions for now because the plan is to get rid of them anyway at the end of the year. I don't know. I don't know what the situation is there, but it's not good. And I would call it a stretch to say that they're mid when they've been bad for a few years and they don't know what's happening with their quarterback situation. They don't know what's happening with their team, and they're not spending a ton of money bringing guys in.
Yeah, well, I mean, what's what happened with the Giants? So, because I know that no, they have they're in a dangerous spot because they should have just, in my opinion, just give them a vote of confidence by giving them new contracts or just cleaning house.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you can't because
Yeah.
to be in that situation right now that they're in, it just really doesn't make much sense to be like, okay, hey guys, if you do, we'll give you one last year. If you do really well, then we got you. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? We got your back. Yeah, that's not
Yeah, it,
cool.
it feels I don't know how anybody can call this situation anything other than a lame duck year for a
Yeah.
general manager and a coach. It just doesn't feel like I mean maybe Brian Daboll because he struck gold, he struck lightning, if you will, a couple years ago with the playoff win with Daniel Jones, but they've come nowhere close to repeating that type of situation.
Yeah, no
So
question about it.
I don't know. I don't
Uh,
think anybody had a worse year than Joe Shane at general manager, and somehow he kept his job.
yeah,
So
yeah, well, yeah, well, you know how that goes. Those folks in the NFL they know how to keep their jobs, boy, I tell you. Or they'll just be or they'll just be like Ziegler and become a what was it, a consultant, whatever, if you
yeah,
will.
a smart hire no matter where he goes, according to Ian Rappaport. For some
Yeah,
reason, whatever.
I wonder how that went down.
Hmm.
So Jackson Dart and I think I think we can say it. I think me, you, and and some other folks have been saying it like his kind of journey to the top 10. I think it's coming. I think it's possible that he could go in the top 10. I think or close to it. I don't know what some of these teams they're not if you're the Saints, they might want to get somebody, they might want to go out and get into the position player, but you have Derek Carr. Like, are they? I mean,
And they're financially committed to Derek Carr
which
for
which
two
is
years.
which is fine. I mean, which is even better because if you take a first round quarterback, he can sit
Yeah.
and you can build a team. You can draft and build a team around Derek Carr. We have questions about the gentleman who's making those picks and how we saw a job, how we saw as a job. But hey,
Yeah.
we can move on from that. There are spots for him to go because I think Cam and Shador are going to go in the top 3. I mean, he's gonna be out there, and I like what are your thoughts about what you saw? I mean, I kind of sent you over the old Miss Georgia tape. He makes some good plays. He makes some bad plays. I mean, I know
Yeah.
he's a work in progress, but I mean, I would say I've seen worse guys to take a shot on. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
As far as size, arm strength, and all things like that.
Well, the my status on and my status on quarterbacks is fairly is consistent as can be. There's no other position in all of sports that's more consistent or that's more impactful and important than quarterback. And so taking a guy that you might have a first round talent or a first round grade on or a second round grade where you think that he can be a stabilizer at the position for 5, 10 years, regardless if you think that he's going to have the overwhelming impact of a superstar like Josh Allen or Lamar Jackson or Patrick Mahomes or one of these guys
Mhm.
or Jaden Daniels or CJ Stroud, like one of these guys, like if he doesn't get to that tier, he doesn't necessarily have to get to that tier to be impactful for the team. You can bring in a guy, insulate him with a good team, and build around him for the first part of it and let him develop over that course of time. And I think that's one of the important things about the quarterback position is that you can consider it quote unquote overdrafting a guy, but the impact of that position is going to be greater than the impact of an Abdul Carter in that situation. If Abdul Carter is an all pro and Jackson Dart is a mere Pro Bowler or the 14th best quarterback in the league, the impact of that 14th best quarterback in the league is always going to be greater than an All Pro pass rusher. Because if
Mhm.
that All Pro pass rusher goes to Cleveland and they don't have a quarterback, then you get Myles Garrett, and then you pay him $40 million a year just to stay at your team because your team is a complete organizational disaster. So you might as well just overpay the guy as much money as you can, keep him in Cleveland until you figure it out. That's kind of what's happening with Max Crosby right now. Now, is he as good as Myles Garrett? No, he's not, but he's right there in that same tier of elite pass rushers and elite defensive players that is in the league. So what do? They front load the contract on him. They overpay him until they figure out the quarterback position. Now, Geno Smith is a stopgap. No matter how you slice it, that guy is a stopgap quarterback. You can't whether they extend him or not, it doesn't matter. That guy is not going to be the savior of the Raiders franchise moving forward. There's no 35-year-old quarterback out there that's going to be doing that. Not it wasn't Stafford. It's not Rodgers who's 40, Stafford who's 37. It's not these guys. It's not Kirk Cousins at 37. Like it's not these guys that you're taking opportunities on. You have to take a young guy in this in the draft. You just have to do it. You're not going to find Rich Gannon. You're not going to find these undrafted guys, these late round guys like that. The chances of that are so slim that a team that doesn't have the luxury to not pass on the top end talent at the quarterback position for these guys. So I think it's definitively clear that there's three quarterbacks in this draft that you take a chance on in the first round. Everything else kind of falls by the wayside. What I can honestly see happening, and it pains me to say this, is that they take a skill position or BPA at 6. They do the same thing again in round 2, and then in round 3 with their last remaining third rounder, they take a quarterback, no matter who it is, whether if that's Quinn Ewers at 3rd, Kyle McCord, Will Howard, Jalen Milroe, one of these guys at the 3rd round, I think is what's going to happen there. So I think they're going to take either an offensive or defensive top end talent at 6. And then they're going to do the same thing, probably the opposite end of the field in the 2nd round. And then they're going to take one of those guys in the 3rd round. That's what I think is going to happen. And I think they'll extend Geno.
Yeah. I'm not sure that. I mean, we'll see. I'm holding out hope that Geno doesn't get extended, but we'll see what happens there
Me
because
too.
the one didn't happen here. Just going over like him. This is a guy who was one of the best college football player, high school football players. He was I think it was number one pick, number one 5-star overall quarterback when he was in high school. His it's funny because like the player comparisons of like what I've kind of compiled here are McCarthy and Nix, and both of those guys
That's
were.
interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, like that. That's where because I'm doing like I do my research and do my evaluation, and then I'm just crossing it with other people. And like those are the names that pop up the most.
Yeah.
Is Nick? I mean, I think I could definitely see that because he's definitely a guy who can move. He can make some really big time throws. The throw against Duke was incredible. We saw that,
Yeah.
but it's also those little things he has to do to get better. And like and Nick's wasn't Nick, even though Nick's was older. And JJ is younger, and we'll see what JJ. Hopefully, we can see what JJ can do this year, and hopefully, the Vikings aren't dumb enough to bring in Aaron Rodgers to that team. But
Yeah.
if you can fine tune some of those mistakes, I do like the fact that he went to the combine on a mission. There were questions about him, and he stood in there and he didn't not do it, and
Yeah.
he performed at a high
I
level.
don't think there's anybody that's had a better combine over the last couple of years than Jackson Dart did.
He did,
Everything you hear from the interviews, from the podium work, from the physical stuff, and he hasn't even had his pro day yet, right?
yeah,
So he hasn't really technically run. He hasn't thrown the Trey Harris out there at the Ole Miss, pro day. He hasn't done all these things where in the ideal scenarios. He went there without the ideal setups for a pro day, without his team backing him in that, without receivers he knew, and he blew it away. He had an outstanding pro day or outstanding combine. And I think that when you have the void, which is always scary, when Drew Alar and Carson Beck leave, so you have the gap between the top two guys and maybe who could have been the third or fourth guy in that situation, and it becomes you all you can do is you can show out the best you can.
yeah,
And you can't just accept and be like, I'm the third guy, so I don't have to perform. I don't think he took it like that. It looks like he took up, what he needed to do personality wise, what he needed to say personality wise to be like, I'm just as good as these guys in this situation. I'm a first round talent. And then he performed, and that's all you can expect a guy in that position to do. It's the same adage of like, when you have sports records or winning streaks and people are like, well, yeah, but who did they play? Like,
Oh
who
yeah.
do they play? It's like, okay, well, all he can do
Yeah.
is do what's expected of him in front of him. All he can do is play who's in front of him. And in this situation, all he could do was do the combine, do the interviews, do the podium work, do everything he needed
Yeah.
to do, and to showcase it. And that's really what it is. Like those, people just have to play what's in front of them, and you either perform or you don't. And he was exceedingly good at what was expected of him to do, and I think he really put his name on the map. I don't think there's any chance Jackson Dart is a second round pick. I think one unequivocally 100% he's going to be a first round pick.
Yeah, I
I
mean,
just do.
the very worst that could happen to him would be if the Browns took Abdul Carter and then he went to the Browns in the second top of the second round,
Yeah.
and they get Carter and Dart, which would be actually pretty good for them. It ended up happening.
A plus plus plus
Yeah,
plus A
yeah,
plus four
exactly.
pluses.
It's like, just like whatever. But so
That would
like
be an
I would
outstanding
say
draft for
I
them.
would I would say there's a I'm gonna throw the link in the bio. I mean the link in the body of this podcast so you can check it out. Just check out the game. I think it was a great game. It was 2 years ago. LSU and Ole Miss 55-42. I think the score was the 55. What was I mean the score 55? It was 55-40, 52-45. Ole Miss wins that game, and just seeing Jackson Dart and Jaden Daniels go back and forth
Yeah.
was actually fun. It was a fun game. It was a really fun game. It was a fun game to watch.
There
So
are flashes of Jackson Dart
there's
that show that
flashes.
he shows he's a top 10 talent. Like he really can show it. And that's why it's important for what he did perform and how he looked at the combine and all the reports coming out about him. That's why it's important because he does have the tape to show you that, okay, well, maybe it's not consistent in every single game where he's like, I'm the best quarterback on this field day in and day out every single week.
Yeah.
However, that's not what you should be looking for at the quarterback position. You should be looking for a foundation of skills and tape to match it to where you think you can exceed and maximize the tape that you did see that was the positive out of him. Regardless if you think he's a second round talent or first round talent. Me personally, I think all second round talents should be considered in the first round just because you get the 5th year option and quarterback is more important than any other position. So
Yeah.
even if you think he's a fringe second round, first round talent, you should strongly consider him or strongly consider trading up for him or
Yeah.
strongly consider picking him, like for the Steelers or the Rams or the Seahawks or the Raiders, like any of these teams that are there with first round picks. It should be considering him from 5 all the way up to 32. I really believe that.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, like I said, he is. Like he's. I know he's a lightning rod for some people. Some people say he's not worth it. Some people say this like that. I mean, I would just say, you know, you you got Tyree Wilson on the roster. You had Cleveland Farrell on the roster. I mean, like it's time to
Yeah.
like. I mean, if you have opportunity to kind of jump on that, for any team in the first round, I would definitely take a chance on it. I mean, because this draft is, if you have an abundance of picks, you can go ahead and maybe take a risk here, and then go ahead and just do your due diligence after that. And you know what?
Yeah.
For those who might want to just throw him in the trash, I would say, like, here is a guy who, if it does work, you're going to look really well. You're gonna look really good.
Genius.
You're gonna
Yeah.
look genius. They're gonna say you guys were patient. You guys did what no other teams wouldn't do. And if you just admit and even if he's a middle of the pack starter, it's still a good. It's
If
still a
you're
really
getting
good
the
pick.
15th best quarterback in the first round,
Yes, you're taking.
you're getting an impactful player
You're taking.
regardless. Like
You're taking.
that's not a swing and a miss. So like say what you want about about a lot of the second round talents that we've seen over the last few years. Like Jimmy Garoppolo was a win. I don't care how you slice it. That was a win. I don't care what he ended up being. That was a win for the Patriots. They traded him off. And they got compensation back for him. He helped the San Francisco become a winning organization again. That was the case. Colin Kaepernick was a second round pick. Derek Carr was a second round pick. I'm not a Derek Carr fan in the slightest. I was very happy when the Raiders got rid of him. But the fact remains is that he's a stabilizing starter in the NFL, regardless of how you feel. The ceiling of that is very clear on Derek Carr. He's got a cap. He needs absolutely perfect circumstances to do that. However, in absolutely perfect circumstances, there are quarterbacks that cannot lead them even to winning seasons in that
100%.
situation.
That is true.
So
That is
in
true.
situations where you have the perfect scenario, there are quarterbacks that can't just perform under those circumstances, and that's important to remember when you're getting a quarterback. But the fact is, it's just time for the Raiders to take a swing. Like
Yeah.
this is why I hate firing a regime every single year. It's like, well, we're just going to wait till the next year. It's like, well, we just saw Telesco get fired after year one. We just saw Ziegler get fired after a year and a half. John Gruden resigned in that situation, but from the emails. But it's not like his drafts were great. His contract is what kept him on. He should have been fired years before that, considering the fact of how bad he was drafting for those teams. Him and Mayock were egregiously bad. So
Yeah.
it's like, I understand the quarterback should not be a last resort ever. It should be a first resort. It should be the first thing you're doing. It should never, never be the last resort and be like, we're just going to wait. Just because people have had those scenarios and they become successful does not mean that should be the way to do it. All the best quarterbacks in the NFL right now are first round picks. All of them. I mean, just go down to the top five. Burrow, Mahomes, Jackson, Allen, all first round picks. And if you want to put Jalen Hurts in there, fine. Then he's a second round pick. But a Burrow, Allen, Mahomes, and Lamar Jackson are all in a class of their own in terms of impact. They're all first rounders, and only one of them is the first overall pick.
And for those
It
who
is what
want
it is,
to,
man.
and for those who want to say, like, listen, this is about. Yes. Some of those guys, Solo mentioned, don't have Super Bowl rings, and some of the naysayers will say, "Oh, well, we're Super Bowl rings," but those quarterbacks that you named, their season starts in the postseason. It doesn't
Yeah,
start in September like everybody else. It's all about, for Burrow, it's about what happens in the playoffs for that team.
yeah.
For Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, like those guys are like, hey, what's gonna happen when we get to the playoffs? Let's put ourselves in a position to be in the best position to have a home game or have a couple of home games in the playoffs, not to be a wild card team, not to be a wild card team.
Yeah. Speaking of the Joe Burrow situation and Derek Carr situation, Joe Burrow's season last year is what Carr stands felt like Derek Carr's whole entire career with the Raiders was. Joe Burrow had an MVP year. He was the best quarterback in football last year. He just was. I know Josh Allen won the MVP. Burrow was the best quarterback in the NFL last year. His defense cost them at least 4 games. And then you had the really awful defensive pass interference call against the Chiefs. They win 3 of those games. They're in the playoffs, and Joe Burrow's the MVP. Guaranteed. Guaranteed. They just saw what Joe Burrow did last year with that team, and they extended both wide receivers in the same year, which is very rare, by the way. You don't see teams extending major
They
contracts to
kept it. Hey,
two players in
listen.
the same position.
Yeah, hey, listen. There was a Bengals fan in a space we had on a Saturday
Yep.
who said that they were going to sign both, and we both were very skeptical that they were going
Yep.
to sign both, and they signed both, and they're looking to try to get a deal with Henderson. I mean, sorry,
Yeah. Hendrickson. Yeah.
Hendrickson as well too. So they're keeping that core together, and they're probably going to do what they do, and they're going to do whatever they can to draft very
Their
well and keep it
their
together.
whole offense is coming back.
Yeah.
They re-signed Gesicki. They have Brown is going to be their running back next year. If they draft a guy to go with Brown, that's going to be great for them.
Could you imagine if they get like the kid from from Rutgers, a big bruising back in that division? So that would
Ollie
be
Gordon.
Ollie Gordon would be an
What
option.
If they get
too.
Ollie Gordon? What if they get Devin Neal?
Yeah.
What if they could? There's a half dozen guys they could add to Chase Brown and have that be an effective tandem. Meanwhile, they've already re-signed everybody they needed to re-sign on their offense, and they just have to build the offensive line back up. So it's like there are avenues for this team for them to like rebound what's happening, especially when they move closer to this is your team now. Your core is Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, and T Higgins. Like that's and Chase Brown. Like those are your core guys right now. In the offense moving forward, and it is a very, very, very good. It's an elite offense, right? So you have the foundation of that team moving forward. They're not going to put as much effort into the defense. They're probably going to try to put a lot of effort into the offensive line to try to get Joe Burrow protected. But even when he's not protected, he's an elite quarterback. He's one of the few guys in the league that doesn't need protection to be as elite as he was. We just saw that last year. So.
Yeah, he has a way of getting things done without perfect circumstances. Even though he has some folks will have the weapons argument, whatever. He's just been phenomenal ever since he's been
He
in
is an
WWE.
elite quarterback, bar
Yeah,
none. He's
burn
one of
on.
the four best guys in the division or in the league. I think he's the second best quarterback in football still. I've been on that bar for the whole time in his entire career. He's one of my favorite players coming out of college ever. He was my number one player coming out of that draft by a mile. It's just he just I to me, I think he's the perfect quarterback.
Yeah.
So
So
I think he's going to win them a Super Bowl championship. I really believe that. So we'll see what happens. But I've
yeah.
been on that train for a while now. I think he's going to do it.
And last thing here too, I would say about the Bengals here, and like I said, we're 70%, 80% rated, but we'll talk about everything around the league.
Yeah.
I want to see the transformation of that defense that was struggled last year. Al Golden really did a good job with the Notre Dame defense over the last couple seasons. Now
Can
he's
we
like,
name four defensive starters for Notre Dame's defense? I mean, it's tough.
I know. I mean, Xavier Watts is the guy who's going to get drafted. So they got some players coming in the draft. I would say that that jump from college to pro, they got to make sure that that's a good one. And I think they got to give them all the I think offensive line and just as much defensive help as they can get that team.
Yeah.
We'll put them where they want to go. Maybe that's the reason why Aaron Rodgers doesn't want to go there because
Yeah, right.
he's going to face all three of those quarterbacks in that division.
Yeah, that's a murderer's row.
It's a murderer's row. It's a tough one. It's tough. Or actually, I'm saying, well, Cleveland doesn't have a quarterback, so but who knows? It could be Shador.
But they got Miles Garrett.
They got